Have you heard of the term Hollywood fixer? These are people who specialize in solving other people's problems. Specifically, these folks would look after the private lives of celebrities. They helped cover up scandals, so the celebrities' public image remained squeaky clean. This video will take a look at some famous Hollywood scandals that were quote-unquote fixed. These were the type of black marks that could potentially sink careers. It shouldn't be a surprise if you've never heard of these transgressions, embarrassments, and wrongdoings before. These specialists were good at their jobs. But there are nonetheless compelling stories. Keep watching as we take a look at old Hollywood scandals that history forgot. Joan Crawford was in an adult film. Everyone remembers Joan Crawford as an icon of Hollywood. She was beautiful, talented, and one of the jewels of the film industry. The Academy Award-winning actress was known for her films like Mildred Pierce, Sudden Fear, and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. For many years, Crawford was MGM Studios' biggest star. However, before she reached the mountaintop, she was grinding in the industry. This hustle included at least one adult film. Crawford starred in the pornographic film Velvet Lips when she was a teenager. Some accounts suggest the actress was even underage at the time of filming. Those who held the film were demanding $100,000 to keep it under wraps. When this came to light to the powers that be in Hollywood, they knew they had to put the kibosh on the story. MGM partnered with famous fixer Eddie Mannix to track down and secure the film and the negatives. As the story goes, Mannix partnered with the mob to stop the would-be extortionists. They offered two options: $25,000 for all the evidence, or a plot of land 6 feet under the ground for the men. That apparently settled the deal. In 1943, after Crawford left MGM, she paid them back $50,000 for helping protect her career. Errol Flynn was tried for statutory rape. Between the 30s and 50s, Errol Flynn was one of the go-to action stars on the big screen. Robin Hood, Don Juan, and Captain Blood were some of his major roles. But Flynn's escapades off-camera were not as heroic. In 1943, Flynn was accused and ultimately stood trial for statutory rape on two 17-year-old girls. Though he denied the charges, Flynn was responsible for the lurid and damning quote, "I like whiskey old and my women young." In the courtroom, it seemed Flynn used his charm and acting skills to wiggle out of the crime. The jury was starstruck by Flynn and found him not guilty. During the trial, Flynn met a 19-year-old girl that he later married. Before we take a look at some of the other celebrity stories that also stayed on the QT, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to FactsVerse if you haven't already. Greta Garbo and Marlene Dietrich's affair. It's been suggested that in 1925, these two starlets appeared in the film The Joyless Street. This is tough to prove because no full copies of the film survived. Yet historian Diana McClellan, studying photographs of the film, is near certain they shared scenes. Why is this interesting? Many accounts claim the two actresses had an affair during filming. The younger Garbo fell hard for Dietrich. On set, it was a torrid love affair that ended after filming. Apparently, their time together ended with both women upset. Later, Dietrich divulged to a friend that Garbo was a, quote, unintelligent child, among other harsh words. George Reeves' mysterious death. George Reeves was most known for his portrayal of Superman. The actor played the hero in over 100 episodes of the series The Adventures of Superman. In 1959, Reeves was found dead in what appeared to be a suicide. Yet there may have been more to the story than what people know. Before his death, Reeves was known to be having an affair with the aforementioned fixer Eddie Mannix. As we know, these problem solvers sometimes had some seriously harsh ways of resolving issues. Naturally, Mannix would not have been pleased about the news. This could be a roundabout way of connecting the dots to murder. Years after Reeves' death, Eddie's wife Toni was overheard confessing in a church that her husband killed the actor. It's an interesting thought that Superman was murdered by Mannix, but most historians still believe Reeves did in fact commit suicide. Hollywood coerced many abortions. The film industry is a business. The wheels have to keep turning and the show must go on. But this notion sometimes has dark connotations. When many stars signed contracts, the studios veritably controlled their lives. The studios decided what films you made and what your public persona would be. The studios went out of their way to ensure their starlets didn't get married or pregnant. In Hollywood's eye, this could be seen as damaging to their rep and keep them from working. As such, many abortions were pressured over the years. Among the actresses who had studio-arranged abortions were Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, Judy Garland, Lana Turner, and more. The cover stories given to the press about the actresses visiting the hospital ranged from getting some rest to an ear infection. Leni Riefenstahl visits Walt Disney. In the 30s, Walt Disney was one of the biggest names in the world. Everyone wanted to get a visit or meet the man. In 1938, he gave a tour of the Disney lot to Nazi filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl. Riefenstahl was the biggest name in Nazi propaganda in Germany. Her 1935 documentary, The Triumph of the Will, was a strong endorsement of the Nazi Party, and it made waves around the globe. Walt Disney showed the director around sets and let her take a look at his new film, Fantasia. The pair even shared a private screening of Riefenstahl's next documentary. Needless to say, this was not a good look for the Mouse House. MGM pushed pills on Judy Garland. The famed singer and star of The Wizard of Oz had a rough go in the film industry. Judy Garland's talent was recognized at a young age, but with this recognition came some horrifying treatment from the execs at MGM. The harassment began at age 13 when an executive called her a fat pig. The studio constantly berated her about her weight. This made the young actress develop diet issues. At age 16, one of the higher-ups said she was so fat she looked like a monster. Her problems developed further. She started taking diet pills supplied by the studio. When she was 18, Louis B. Mayer, one of the M's in MGM, ensured she go on the shocking diet of black coffee, chicken soup, 80 cigarettes, and a regimen of diet pills every day. This deplorable treatment led to Garland suffering from eating issues and drug abuse for the rest of her life. Lana Turner's daughter killed a made man. Lana Turner built her career by playing femme fatales in such films as The Postman Always Rings Twice. But it seemed some of this bad side showed off camera as well. In the 50s, Turner was dating known mafioso Johnny Stompanato. Johnny Stomp had ties to the notorious mobster Mickey Cohen. In 1958, Stompanato was found stabbed to death in Turner's home. The culprit was Turner's 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl Crane. Crane stabbed Stompanato with a butcher's knife in the stomach in front of Turner. She was said to be protecting her mother from the man. Turner took the stand at trial. Even Mickey Cohen was brought in as a witness. The court ruled the killing was justified. Yet, like many Hollywood scandals, sordid rumors went around. Was young Crane in love with Stompanato? Did Turner kill him and get her daughter to take the blame? Maybe some of the famous fixers knew the true tale. 4 people died while filming Hell's Angels. Howard Hughes was one of the most famed aviators and business magnates of the 20th century. One of his many undertakings was making movies, and perhaps his most famous film was 1930's Hell's Angels. This big-budget film, featuring airplane dogfights, was rife with production woes. Ultimately, it cost $4 million to make. Always a perfectionist, Hughes wanted the film to be as realistic as possible. This resulted in some very dangerous stunts. While it did result in some thrilling footage, it wasn't without tragedy. On set, 3 pilots and 1 mechanic were killed. Lana Turner had an abortion without anesthesia. At the age of 17, Lana Turner entered the film business. Her performance as Cynthia in the 1938 movie Love Finds Andy Hardy captured the hearts of America. The bombshell quickly became known as the Sweater Girl for how well her curvaceous figure filled out a sweater. But Turner's personal life managed to outweigh any drama on screen, as the actress went through 8 marriages. In 1941, while on a publicity tour in Hawaii, a Hollywood fixer made arrangements for Turner to have an abortion. The procedure reportedly took place in the actress's hotel room without anesthesia. Turner's mother was apparently responsible for covering the mouth of her daughter to muffle her cries. The abortion cost $500, and the expense was deducted from Turner's paycheck. Rock Hudson was forced to hide his homosexuality by getting married. Rock Hudson was undeniably a Hollywood hunk and sex symbol. Due to this, a studio forced him to marry Phyllis Gates in 1955. This was all to hide the fact that the Hollywood star was gay. While insiders knew this, it was kept a secret to preserve Hudson's leading man status. It's a sad fact to admit, but in those times, Hudson's career as a dreamy, romantic lead would be ruined if news got out about his sexuality. The marriage lasted a mere 3 years. Hudson was one of the first major celebrities to die from AIDS in 1985, and he came out publicly before his death. A movie studio forced Judy Garland to have 2 abortions and take dangerous drugs. When a movie studio forces an actress to have an abortion, it's a shameful demand. But in the case of Judy Garland, it was also her mother who was involved. In 1939, Garland, at only 17 years old, took the world by storm. She shot to stardom with her portrayal of Dorothy in the classic The Wizard of Oz. A couple of years later, Garland married bandleader David Rose. This did not go down well with MGM, as she didn't ask for their consent. They wanted their star to remain young in the eyes of moviegoers, but this wouldn't be the case as long as she was acting like an adult. She became pregnant, and her mother worked with the studio to make arrangements for her daughter's abortion. Garland once again became pregnant and was forced to have an abortion for the second time. The abortions, however, were not the only atrocious commands placed on the actress. By the time she finished filming The Wizard of Oz, she was already addicted to barbiturates and amphetamines. MGM's disgraceful behavior included the studio reportedly running all their child stars into the ground. The stars were forced to shoot film after film without a break. The teenage stars were given pep pills in order to keep them spunky and awake. When they couldn't sleep, they were given barbiturates and sleeping pills. Garland was forced into this dangerous upper-downer cycle of pills. Additionally, the studio not only put the actress on an unsafe diet for her to lose her so-called chubbiness, but they also made her take dangerous drugs to lose weight. Garland died in 1969 at age 47 from an overdose of barbiturates. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like, and subscribe to Facts Verse if you haven't already. MGM's penalty clauses led to Ava Gardner having an abortion. From 1951 to 57, Ava Gardner was married to Frank Sinatra. He was her third husband. During their marriage, Gardner was forced to have the abortion because of MGM's penalty clauses against their star actresses having babies. Sinatra reportedly did not know about the procedure. Gardner explained the situation that if she had a baby, her salary would be cut off. She claimed Sinatra was broke at the time, and her future movies were going to take her all over the world. MGM arranged everything, including the travel. It was all kept very hush-hush. Jean Harlow was forbidden from getting married. Known for being one of the original blonde bombshells, Jean Harlow signed a morality clause with MGM that forbade her to marry actor William Powell. Their reasoning was that a woman is much sexier to the common man if she remains single. Loretta Young hid her pregnancy and adopted her own daughter. Loretta Young, a child star who became an Academy Award-winning actress, was one of the few Hollywood stars who refused to have an abortion. While filming Call of the Wild in 1935, she fell in love with star Clark Gable. Young claimed Gable pressured her and she eventually slipped, but only once. That one slip led to Young getting pregnant, but Gable was a married man. Young covered up the pregnancy by claiming to have a mysterious illness. She then had the baby in secret and staged an adoption. Now that's how you play the system. Louis B. Mayer purposefully ruined John Gilbert's career. Co-founder of MGM, Louis B. Mayer had a great eye for talent. He was a huge part of making MGM one of the biggest movie studios of old Hollywood. During silent cinema's transition to sound, he decided to dump actor John Gilbert. He believed Gilbert was too expensive and the two often clashed. So what did Louis do to make sure Gilbert did not make the transition to talkies? He planted stories in fan magazines claiming the actor's high-pitched voice was causing distress on the movie lot. He even went as far as to cast Gilbert in several films he knew were complete bombs. With bad press followed by poor reviews, Gilbert walked away from MGM in 1933. He is now considered one of the most popular actors to never make the transition from silent cinema to talkies. Dorothy Dandridge was forced by the studio to have an abortion. Labeled by many as the Black Marilyn Monroe, the beautiful Dorothy Dandridge became a star in the 1954 movie Carmen Jones. Dandridge became close with Otto Preminger, the director of the film, and their relationship became sexual. This resulted in Dandridge becoming pregnant, but Preminger refused to leave his wife. The studio demanded Dandridge get an abortion, as they wanted her to remain a sex symbol. On top of this was the controversy that she was mixed race and Preminger was white. Miscegenation laws in 1955 were still in existence in several states. This made it illegal for mixed-race couples to marry. Clara Bow had a nervous breakdown, so Paramount fired her. Clara Bow was silent cinema's hottest sex symbol. She was at the forefront of public gossip with tales of her wild sexual adventures, including a threesome with Mexican prostitutes, a slew of engagements, and the rumor that she slept with the whole starting lineup of the 1927 USC Trojan football team. With such wild escapades under her belt, Bow was a tireless worker. From 1922 to 33, she made 58 films. But in typical Hollywood fashion, they were not keen on the bad reputation that Bow created. After suffering a nervous breakdown, Paramount seized the opportunity and fired her. She made her final film at age 28. After this, Bow married and had 2 children. But a long family history of mental illness, including her mother trying to slit Bow's throat one time, finally caught up with her. In 1944, she attempted suicide, which led to her in a psychiatric hospital. Bette Davis had an abortion for the biggest role of her career. Veteran actress Bette Davis came to terms with the deal and knew that if she had the child she was pregnant with in 1934, her career would be permanently damaged. She admitted she would have missed the biggest role in her life if she didn't have an abortion. Looking back, it seems she was right. She landed the part of Mildred in the 1934 movie Of Human Bondage and was rewarded with her first of 11 Academy Award nominations. The following year, she won the Oscar for her role in Dangerous, and again in 1939 for Jezebel. Cary Grant. In 1960, the editors at Good Housekeeping magazine got a rather unusual phone call. Cary Grant, the suave, sophisticated Hollywood star who rarely gave interviews, was on the other end of the line and wanted to talk. What he wanted to talk about was the unbelievable amount of LSD he'd been dropping. That and the fact he thought everyone else should start dropping acid with him. Grant was born into a poor family in Bristol, with a cheating father and a mother who disappeared suddenly when his father had her committed to an insane asylum. Grant spent most of his adult life in film dealing with the demons of his childhood. After decades of trouble, his third wife turned him on to LSD therapy, and those sessions apparently blew his mind. Between 1958 and 61, Grant reportedly dropped acid at least 100 times, and it turned him into an evangelist for his favorite cure for the blues. Of course, being acid, some of the things he went on about sounded a little nuts. One vision he recounted had him turning into a giant wang and blasting off into outer space. He only stopped dosing when the counterculture picked up on the acid craze. He didn't want his image getting mixed up with all those hippies. Peter Lorre. If you've seen pictures of Peter Lorre, you probably noticed his droopy eyes. He usually looked like he was about to fall asleep. He leveraged this look into a career of playing weirdos and villains, but the look had less to do with genetics and more to do with what the actor was putting in his arm. Lorre spent most of his career whacked out on morphine. He got addicted long before appearing on screen, after having appendix surgery in his native Europe. According to the London Review of Books, Lorre's doctors kept him so full of morphine, he ended up addicted. His addiction was a well-known fact in Hollywood, with his friends joking that the M stood for morphine in the German thriller M, in which he played the role of the serial killer. When he moved to Hollywood, he also ended up getting hooked on prescription pills and cough medicine. For parts of his career, Lorre would choose roles based on how they interfered with his drug habit. For example, he took the role of Mr. Moto in an 8-film series because, while he needed the money, they would also let him shoot up in his crew trailer. Even with the entire film being shot where he was so drugged out he could barely get up a flight of stairs, he still outacted everyone else on set. Orson Welles. Most people who go under the knife to get a nose job are concerned about making their nose smaller. That wasn't the case with Orson Welles. The famous actor and director thought his nose was too small for the size of his face. He had his makeup department give him fake noses for every role he played. The bigger the better. Welles sported a fake nose in almost every role. At the beginning of his career, those noses were relatively normal-sized. By the end, they became misshapen, bulging appendages that swelled up the center of his face. He was unwilling to work without them, too. When he took an acting role in Black Magic while still trying to finish directing Macbeth, he was more worried about his box of fake noses than about finishing his film. After finishing a film, he would name his noses and keep them in his home in Hollywood. He would occasionally pull them out at parties and do magic tricks with them. Joan Crawford. From the outside looking in, Joan Crawford seemed like she had the perfect life. She was a 3-time Academy Award-nominated actress who gave to charitable causes and adopted 5 children. She even reportedly had a steamy one-night stand with Marilyn Monroe, proving that old Hollywood could keep up with anything in the modern internet age. In spite of her outward appearances, Crawford was an egomaniac who was consumed by jealousy, according to her adopted daughter Christina. The year after she died, Christina published her infamous book, Mommy Dearest, an account of her time with Crawford. It made the Hollywood star sound like the mother from hell. Some of the tidbits shared in the book include the revelation that Crawford had told Christina her birth mother was dead when she wasn't, stories of Crawford going nuts when she found her daughter's dresses hung on wire hangers, and harrowing stories of physical abuse she occasionally unleashed on her adopted children. To be fair, the book does have its detractors. 2 of Crawford's other adopted children have disputed the stories. Because Crawford's craziness is so well documented in other ways, it's still considered plausible. She used shady back channels to adopt her kids, resulting in one of their birth mothers reclaiming one of the children just a few days after his arrival. There's also her well-documented feud with the equally weird Bette Davis, which ended up in Crawford sabotaging her own film's success to stop Davis from winning her 3rd Oscar. W.C. Fields. W.C. Fields is well known for playing a misanthropic, alcoholic jerk in all his movies. While he was very good at the role, it can't be considered acting because he was just as moody and drunk in real life. In his look back at Fields' classic 1940 comedy The Bank Dick, film critic Roger Ebert shared detailed insight into his alcohol-fueled craziness. The overweight modeled star was mostly drunk his entire career. He was so obsessed with the thought of being caught without a drop of alcohol that he hoarded enough of it in his attic to last him 25 years. One version of the story claims this was an insurance policy against prohibition coming back. Ultimately, this reliance on alcohol started to affect his career. Later in life, Fields demanded $15,000 for every screenplay he wrote. Any producer who managed to get caught in his trap ended up with some vague chicken scratches on the back of an envelope, if anything at all. According to his friend Groucho Marx, Fields also loved to mess with regular people. He would hide behind the bushes in front of his house and shoot passersby with a BB gun. Peter Sellers. Most people fear things like heights, snakes, or spiders. Not Peter Sellers. He was terrified of the color purple. Sellers' strangeness wasn't the bumbling, goofy kind he often played on screen. He was such a nutjob most people couldn't stand to be around him. He'd have screaming meltdowns on film sets and freak out at his wives, smashing dishes and threatening them with his shotgun. To vent his frustrations with directors and producers on movies, who were typically more powerful than him, he'd get low-level people fired from the set. He was vaguely racist and very superstitious, which led to his conviction that the famed director Vittorio De Sica was a source of supernatural knowledge. While they worked together on After the Fox, Sellers saw De Sica yell at a script girl for wearing purple. The director told him it was the color of death, and Sellers took that to heart. He became convinced the color purple could kill and would throw tantrums anytime he came into contact with it. Tippi Hedren. Tippi Hedren is best known for acting terrified of a flock of birds in Hitchcock's 1963 thriller, The Birds. So it might seem a little strange to hear she shared her Hollywood home with one of the scariest animals possible, a fully grown 400-pound male lion. This unlikely pairing stemmed from Hedren's conservation work. She'd been actively working to save big cats for decades, winning a host of awards for her efforts. So living with a lion wasn't just for show or to impress other Hollywood stars. Even so, it was pretty impressive and more than a little terrifying. Hedren's lion, Neil, had the run of the house and would often walk through the living room when she had guests visiting. At that time, Hedren's teenage daughter, Melanie Griffith, was living with her, and she would occasionally let Neil and Griffith sleep in the same bed. Fortunately, Neil didn't maul Hedren, Griffith, or any of their house guests, but they later got other lions and each member of the family was attacked at one point or another. Griffith even needed facial reconstruction surgery after being badly mauled. Hedren has since come to her senses and admits that having a lion living in her house was stupid beyond belief. Humphrey Bogart. Depending on which studio publicist you listen to, Humphrey Bogart either got his signature scar above his lip in a fistfight as a kid, after being decked by a prisoner being transported when he was a sailor in the Navy, or after taking shrapnel during a battle while he was a crewman on the USS Leviathan. But if you asked his old drinking buddies, they'd tell you Humphrey got the scar during one of his countless drunken barroom brawls when he used to frequent the Prohibition-era illicit drinking establishments of New York City. While he was honing his craft as a Broadway actor, Bogart became infamous for drinking until he was no longer conscious at a bar. Whenever someone tried to wake him, he would always be quick to try to pick a fight. His violent tendencies, coupled with his drinking habits, got him kicked out of more than one stage production. But that didn't stop him from gaining enough recognition to eventually make the move to Hollywood. Bogart settled in the notorious Garden of Allah, a housing development that became synonymous with its raucous clientele and the 24-hour lounge that served them even when other bars refused to. Bogart had quite the crew of drinking buddies to get into trouble with. Some of his closest companions included director John Huston, his lover Lauren Bacall, and old Blue Eyes himself, Frank Sinatra. It was actually Bogart that formed the first incarnation of the Rat Pack. Despite all the hardship that drinking brought into his life, Bogart cheekily claimed to only have gone on the wagon once, claiming that experience was the worst afternoon of his life. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you give it a like and subscribe to Facts Verse if you haven't already. And stay tuned to learn which Hollywood star was known for being a lovable drunk. Errol Flynn. On screen, he was known for being a charismatic madcap, and in real life, he was known to be an even more charismatic womanizer. Flynn is forever remembered for being one of the original Hollywood bad boys. His drug and alcohol abuse, sex life, and party-hard mentality made him something of a legend. Some of his drunken exploits included getting wasted with a pre-rebellion Fidel Castro, getting the Warner Lot bar shut down by Mr. Warner himself because Flynn kept getting tipsy on set, bringing a doctor's bag with him to work every day containing 2/5 of vodka, and having a bachelor pad with David Niven in Malibu that earned the nickname Cirrhosis by the Sea. Sadly, that nickname proved prophetic, because in 1959, at the age of 50, Flynn died after having a heart attack induced by acute cirrhosis of the liver. Clara Bow. At times, it's almost impossible to deduce which of the tales surrounding the classic stars are real and which are just exaggeration, studio spin, and the overactive imaginations of their fans. Clara Bow knew this truth all too well. Quite a few nasty rumors and salacious stories were spread about her that were unequivocally not true. There was an article printed in the Coastal Times newspaper that accused her of all sorts of things not based on real evidence. They tried to paint her as bisexual, which back then was kind of a big deal, who frequently slept with prostitutes and even engaged in acts of bestiality. Kenneth Anger further desecrated her public image by making the claim in his controversial book Hollywood Babylon that Clara would routinely sexually service the entire USC football team after games. Of course, this claim was equally as dubious, but back then there were no fact-checking sites to debunk such lies. But even though she had quite a few awful things printed about her that weren't based in reality, she did live quite the extravagant life and was often spotted at bars heavily intoxicated, where she would often go home with married men. She wasn't a saint by any means and developed such a wild reputation as she did largely because of her lavish and hedonistic lifestyle. W.C. Fields. William Claude Dukenfield was born above a bar during pre-Prohibition times. When the government cracked down on booze and made it illegal, the young drunk stashed thousands of bottles of whiskey and gin in his attic. Even after Prohibition was lifted, he still continued to keep an abundant supply of emergency liquor in his home, just in case. While on set, Fields would always carry a vacuum flask filled with gin martinis that he would call his lemonade. Humorously, there was one time that somebody swapped out his gin with actual lemonade, prompting Fields to furiously cry out, "Who put lemonade in my lemonade?" Spencer Tracy. When Tracy got drunk, he was known to get very mean. Everyone knew he had a tendency towards violence when he hit the bottle, and he hit it a lot. He often got himself into heated bar fights, got arrested, and one time woke up in a padded room in a Chicago mental hospital. This two-time Oscar winner wasn't necessarily drunk all the time. He'd stay sober for long stretches of time, but eventually would find his way back to the liquor store. He would often hole up in hotel rooms for weeks on end. He spent a lot of his time soaking in the bathtub, sipping on drinks, not even getting up to relieve himself. Tracy's drinking eventually got so bad that Fox threatened to fire him if he didn't quit. In response, Tracy stormed out of the office and walked to the bar across the street. After getting hammered, he returned to the office and proceeded to make a scene. Tracy was fired by Fox but landed a contract with MGM not long after. But since the studio already knew about his drinking, they hired a crew they called the Tracy Squad, whose duty it was to babysit the unpredictable binge drinker. Peter O'Toole. Spencer Tracy may have been the quintessential example of a sad drunk, but Peter was known for being a charming, fun-loving goofball of a drunk. The Lawrence of Arabia star was reportedly a riot to be around while off set. While he was younger, he apparently lived aboard a barge that sunk because there were too many people attending a party he threw. Then, when getting married to his wife Shawn, he decided to forego a traditional reception and instead go on an absurdly elaborate pub crawl. And when she gave birth to their first child, Peter showed up very inebriated with a full chorus of his equally drunk actor friends, who proceeded to sing for the whole hospital. Peter would often get drunk and wake up in strange, unexpected places. Once he found himself in Mexico with no recollection of the evening before. Another time, he and Michael Caine were roused by a furious occupant of an apartment whom they had never seen before. One of the most famous of his drinking tales was the time he accidentally cut the tip of one of his fingers off while drinking. First, he tried to use brandy to sterilize the wound. He attempted to reattach the finger himself before finishing the bottle of brandy. A couple of weeks later, he unwrapped the bandage to figure out why it still hurt, only to find that not only did the finger not somehow miraculously reattach, but he also put it on backwards. James Stewart. While the average audience member thinks of the innocent face of old Hollywood, few actors epitomize this quite like James Stewart. Known colloquially as Jimmy, James had a long and healthy career in the industry that started before the days of World War II, before blossoming into something even greater after it. James served in the war, and his father before him had served in World War I. When James returned from the war, he feared he'd have a hard time returning to his career with all the traction he'd lost. While this was an issue initially, he eventually grew to become a bigger star than ever. Of course, some of his most iconic roles include his turns in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and It's a Wonderful Life, as well as appearances in the Alfred Hitchcock films Vertigo and Rear Window. Those later films showcased a slightly darker side to Stewart, while his performances in the prior two features were more emblematic of the beloved actor's public persona as a whole. But beneath James's nice guy demeanor and lovable drawl, there was a streak of racism and general xenophobia. James Stewart's nice guy demeanor doesn't necessarily seem to have been a complete illusion, as most of those who knew the man personally and worked with him closely claimed he was just as nice when the cameras weren't rolling as when they were. But this is likely because James made sure to surround himself with people who were like-minded and white. There was a black co-star who accused James Stewart of racism while the two were working on the set of The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Famous director John Ford directed it, while the actor who accused James of racism was Woody Strode. Those looking to forgive the deceased actor's more backward tendencies attribute his racism to his upbringing. James grew up in a small town in Indiana, and there was nary a non-white in sight. James wasn't afforded the opportunity to see many African Americans during his childhood years, and these opportunities didn't increase all that much when James ventured out to Princeton to get his higher education. Besides James's apparent distrust of African Americans, the actor was also seemingly distrusting of Jews. It seems James was simply xenophobic in general, and this caused him to develop a fairly close relationship with FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. Both of them shared similar conservative values, and this caused James to become J. Edgar Hoover's right-hand man when it came time to hunt down communists in Hollywood. James Stewart acted as an informant for the FBI director in many situations. While Hoover didn't care about James's claims that the mafia was trying to take over Hollywood, he was all ears when it came time for the actor to spill the beans about his communist co-stars. James Stewart was a good friend of Henry Fonda's before Hollywood's second Red Scare. When Henry found out James was working as an informant for J. Edgar Hoover, the two stopped talking for many years. Despite all these problematic aspects of James Stewart, the actor remains a beloved old Hollywood icon in the eyes of most people. William Frawley. I Love Lucy's William Frawley's legacy has been plagued with complaints that the comedic actor was as much of a curmudgeon off the screen as he was on it, which is part of why he played grumpy characters so well. But while fans can brush off the facts that William was pretty much always drunk and didn't get along with his coworkers, audiences may be more hesitant to brush off the hard-to-ignore reality that William was a bit of a racist. It was Frawley's knack for playing curmudgeonly characters that got him hired by Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz to play the part of Fred Mertz on I Love Lucy. By that point in his career, the veteran vaudevillian performer had already been working for many years and had developed a reputation for being hard to work with. This almost caused him to lose out on the role of Fred Mertz, but Desi Arnaz's gut instinct kicked in and made him demand Williams' inclusion. Desi certainly knew what he was doing by hiring Frawley to play Fred Mertz, as the role became the actor's most iconic. Though William was drunk throughout much of I Love Lucy's filming, the actor managed to curtail much of his problematic behavior to make shoots go smoothly. Most claim he was a misogynist. While William couldn't be rude to Lucille Ball because she was his boss, he could be rude to the actress who played his on-screen wife, Vivian Vance. Frawley and Vance reportedly got into it constantly on set. But these incidents consisted mostly of innocent bickering. On the less innocent side of things was Williams' racism, as the actor was said to have thrown around racial slurs liberally. Today that kind of thing wouldn't fly, but William came from a time and a place where people were simply allowed and encouraged to treat women and minorities differently. Besides Williams' penchant for racism and misogyny, the alcoholic actor also infamously punched Clifton Webb in the face on Broadway. Before we tell you more about old Hollywood actors who were racist, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Facts Verse if you haven't already. John Wayne. John Wayne was an avid conservative and patriot, but unlike James Stewart, John didn't have an authentic nice guy demeanor that makes this hard truth easier to go down in retrospect. The bulk of the modern-day controversy surrounding Western legend John Wayne stems from an interview the Hollywood veteran gave with Playboy in a now notorious 1971 issue. In it, John Wayne does things as outright condone white supremacy, refuse to express remorse about slavery, and make flagrant use of homophobic slurs. According to John Wayne, there was no reason he should ever have had to think about the fact that African Americans were historically enslaved. While one might think the actor was trying to make a point about the fact that he wasn't directly involved in slavery, as it had been abolished years before his birth, his support of general white supremacy suggests there may be more to the actor's refusal to express remorse about historical slavery. John's support of white supremacy in his Playboy interview came with the adage that he only believed white supremacy was necessary until African Americans received a proper education. However, it's unsure what exactly would have constituted a proper amount of education in the actor's eyes. His use of homophobic slurs came about when it was time to discuss the film Midnight Cowboy, which had recently made waves in Hollywood. Of course, the largely conservative John Wayne was not remotely a fan of the cutting-edge film. Perhaps because of the excessively flagrant and well-documented nature of John Wayne's problematic values, the actor's legacy has been damaged since his passing, much more than the legacies of the stars we previously mentioned. John graduated from the University of Southern California. Recently, an exhibit at the college honoring the actor was removed as a result of student protests, those being inspired by the actor's Playboy interview. Some have also attempted to have the actor's name removed from John Wayne Airport in Orange County, though these attempts have continuously failed. Walter Brennan. Finally, let's take a look at classic star Walter Brennan. Walter won several Academy Awards over his lifetime and appeared in classics such as The Westerner and Sergeant York. He also appeared with John Wayne in a handful of classic films such as Rio Bravo. Like William Frawley, Brennan made a name for himself playing characters who were generally curmudgeonly. Also like William, these tendencies were typically matched in the actor's real-life behavior. Like James Stewart, Walter was a Hollywood legend who detested communism. However, he took his detesting of communism a step further by branding anyone who held any liberal beliefs whatsoever as such. The most problematic aspect of Walter Brennan is probably the fact he hung around with members of the John Birch Society, which is notoriously in favor of segregation. The actor also reportedly expressed joy when it was announced that Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. Ava Gardner. Old Blue Eyes Frank Sinatra sang songs about this star, but he wasn't the only man to get all caught up in Ava's allure. She was married for a brief period to actor Mickey Rooney in the early 40s. And while he at one point boasted about how good their love life was in his eyes, Gardner burst his bubble by saying while he may have enjoyed the sex, she sure didn't. Gardner famously was also involved with the eccentric multimillionaire Howard Hughes and jazz musician Artie Shaw before marrying Sinatra in 1951. She later had an affair with Ernest Hemingway while vacationing in Cuba. To get an exact count on the number of men Gardner seduced would be downright impossible because even the partners we just listed are the tip of the iceberg in terms of her sexual conquests. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. And stick around for more about celebrities and their sexual partners. Elizabeth Taylor. This legendary actress was famed for both her acting chops and distinct beauty. Taylor was also known for being one of the most scandalous seductresses in show business back in her day. Perhaps her most controversial moment happened when she slept with singer Eddie Fisher while he was married to her best friend, Debbie Reynolds. Taylor and Fisher eventually got married after he broke things off with Reynolds, although the two ultimately divorced. Taylor felt terrible for what she'd done to her so-called bestie and offered Reynolds a heartfelt apology. Fortunately, the damage wasn't permanent, and the two reconciled things and continued as best buds. Throughout her life, Taylor was married 7 times, although she married Richard Burton twice. After getting divorced for the last time in 1996, when she parted ways with construction worker Larry Fortensky, she decided enough was enough, and remained single until 2011 when she passed away. Vivien Leigh. Best known for portraying Scarlett O'Hara and Blanche DuBois in Gone with the Wind and A Streetcar Named Desire, Leigh was also known for being stunningly beautiful and irresistible to the leading men she accompanied on screen. But for her, success didn't come easy, and her notorious marriage to Sir Laurence Olivier was tumultuous to say the least. When she first laid eyes on Olivier, while attending a play he was performing in, she told her friend he was the man she was destined to marry someday, despite the fact she was already married to her first husband, Herbert Lee Holman. But to her, people were disposable. She was willing to do anything and everything to achieve what she wanted, regardless of who got hurt in the process. Olivier was likewise married when he caught Leigh's attention, but that too didn't stop her from following him and his wife when they vacationed in Capri. Leigh and Olivier ended up sleeping together even though his wife, Jill Esmond, was pregnant. Olivier kicked Esmond to the curb and married Leigh shortly thereafter. After she divorced Olivier in 1960, Leigh dated John Merivale for 7 years before passing away in 1967 from tuberculosis. Other partners Leigh was linked to included Marlon Brando, Elia Kazan, Orson Welles, Justin Mitchell, Alexandra Korda, Stuart Granger, Ona Munson, and Peter O'Toole. Tallulah Bankhead. She was drop-dead gorgeous, witty, rebellious, and not afraid in the least to speak her mind, regardless of how her words alienated people in her orbit. Bankhead was one of the most prominent sex symbols of her day. Writer and actor Emlyn Williams once described her sultry voice as being as steeped in sex as the human voice could possibly go without drowning. She notoriously got around, and her sexual appetite was said to be bottomless. Bankhead struggled with substance abuse and alcoholism, and reportedly smoked as many as 120 cigarettes a day, but wasn't shy about candidly discussing her many vices. She was openly bisexual at a time when that sexual orientation wasn't widely accepted. In an interview with Motion Picture Magazine in 1932, Bankhead bragged she hadn't had an affair in 6 months, complaining that was 6 months too long. After the release of the Kinsey reports, Tallulah was quoted as saying she didn't find anything shocking about Alfred Kinsey's conclusions. She went on to explain she had numerous momentary love affairs and impromptu romances that she went into impulsively. In 1933, Bankhead almost died after having a 5-hour emergency hysterectomy procedure due to venereal disease. When she left the hospital, she told the doctor he shouldn't assume she had learned a lesson from the ordeal. The New Yorker reported Bankhead claimed that she had slept with roughly 500 people in her life. In addition to her many affairs with male stars, Tallulah was also linked romantically with female celebs like Greta Garbo, Hattie McDaniel, Beatrice Lillie, and Marlene Dietrich. Jayne Mansfield. This actress, aside from Mae West, was probably the most racy and sexually promiscuous actress in Hollywood history. The blonde bombshell, who was famously photographed giving Sophia Loren an eye full of cleavage, had countless lovers. She was even rumored to have been JFK's mistress for a spell. Her most infamous romp was with Church of Satan founder Anton LaVey, although Anton only publicly claimed he had an affair with her after the actress had passed away. Mae West. Another blonde bombshell who deserves mention in this video is this Brooklynite actress who took Hollywood by storm in the early 1930s with her deliberately loose image. She was someone ahead of her time. She supported gay rights, slept with African-American lovers, and openly ridiculed the traditional institution of marriage. When West was 17, she married vaudeville actor Frank Satkus, who performed under the stage name Frank Wallace. She attempted to keep that marriage a secret, but it was revealed to the public when a filing clerk discovered the marriage certificate and promptly alerted the press. West divorced Wallace in 1942. While Wallace was the only person West ever married, she was well known for sleeping around. One of her most famous lovers was Paul Novak, who she claimed was the love of her life. Lupe Velez. Known by some as the Mexican Spitfire, Velez was rumored to have died with her head in a toilet after committing suicide in response to her lover leaving her and their unborn child. According to her secretary, however, Velez was actually found deceased in her bed. She was tied to actor Gary Cooper, whom she dated for many years, and referred to as the love of her life. She was reportedly viciously jealous of Cooper and repeatedly accused him of having affairs with actor Anderson Lawler, among others. Lupe was notorious for her flagrant exhibitionism. It's rumored she slept with hundreds of lovers throughout her life. She would also routinely lift her skirt over her head to reveal she wasn't wearing any underwear. Clara Bow. This actress was the Hollywood it girl of the silent film era, and one of the film industry's first starlets. By the time she retired from acting at age 28 in 1931, her life was already steeped in scandal. It's rumored she slept with the entire USC football team, and she routinely treated her boyfriends as engagements, which only created controversy when she would promptly move on to the next one. Louise Brooks. This actress had an incredibly brief yet prolific film career. After leaving her first husband, director Eddie Sutherland, she fell for George Preston Marshall, the owner of the Washington Redskins. She eventually left him to marry someone else, whom she likewise left after only being married for 6 months. She had many lovers, including Greta Garbo, and wasn't opposed to posing in the nude, something she'd frequently do. Rudolph Valentino and Natasha Rambova. Rudolph Valentino was a debonair and attractive leading man during the Roaring '20s, and one of the first marriages of the so-called Lavender marriage era happened when he married actress Jean Acker. Though we should note that, like many of the marriages in this video and during that era, it involves a lot of speculation about the true sexual proclivities of the people involved. Because homosexuality during that era was shrouded in secrecy, many stars took their true sexual orientation with them to the grave. So many times the label of lavender marriage was applied to a marriage where it wasn't known for sure that one or both members were not straight. However, there were rumors going around Hollywood that Rudolph Valentino was bisexual. This posed a PR issue for him and his studio. At the same time, actor Jean Acker was enjoying relative success in town, but was rumored to be a lesbian. So, studio execs took matters into their own hands and arranged for the two to be married in 1919. As the story goes, Acker was already disillusioned with the marriage before the ink on their marriage certificate was dry. She reportedly locked Valentino outside their shared hotel room on the night of their wedding. Not a great start, though the marriage did last slightly longer as the couple split 2 years later. Valentino's star rose even higher in the 1920s, and there was a lot of pressure from the studio to keep that path intact. They also became more concerned when Valentino began taking on roles that weren't as traditionally masculine as his previous ones had been. This included 1924's Monsieur Beaucaire. To counter this trend, the studio insisted he marry again. So he turned to his friend Natasha Rambova, who was a costume and set designer. Rambova was in a lesbian relationship with actress Alla Nazimova at the time. She was also facing the wrath of the studios. Valentino and Rambova wed in 1923 to attempt to put down rumors of their alleged homosexuality. Sadly, this ruse didn't last long either, and the two divorced in 1925. As a result of these failed marriages and the rumors of his sexuality, Valentino was referred to in certain circles as the Pink Powder Puff. Before we tell you more, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Danny Kaye and Sylvia Fine. Danny Kaye was a star performer in his day. He shined as a singer, dancer, comedian, actor, and more. Over the course of the 40s and 50s, he starred in 17 films, such as The Kid from Brooklyn, The Spectre General, and The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. He was also a prominent and successful singer and dancer. In 1954, he became the ambassador at large of UNICEF and was the first person to hold this distinction. Later in life, he was awarded the French Legion of Honor for many decades of work with UNICEF. While Kay was indeed a leading man in Hollywood, he also wasn't known for playing roles that typified the rugged, masculine aesthetic. He was famous for his skills at physical comedy as well as pantomime. He also performed novelty songs that gained him even more success. The roles Kay often took were characters who were weak and cowardly. Sometimes they were outwardly effeminate. While this should have been seen primarily as evidence of his skill as an actor, they were also taken to mean he wasn't a man's man in the traditional sense. Although, to be fair, Kay was also known to be romantically involved with other men, particularly in his early days when he performed as a vaudeville comic. His supposed lavender marriage happened in 1940, when he married pianist Sylvia Fine. But in contrast with some of the other marriages of the era that fell apart, Kay and Fine's marriage lasted until his death in 1987. They had a daughter together named Dina. So it seems likely that if this marriage had been a full sham, it wouldn't have lasted through decades. So perhaps Kay was bisexual and found his soulmate in Sylvia. Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates. The marriage of Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates is often considered one of the most famous of the lavender marriages. This is perhaps because of the nature of Rock Hudson's Hollywood stardom. Rock was at the top of the A-list during his prime, and was one of the most prominent leading men and heartthrobs in America. He was a sure thing at the box office, starring in movies like Magnificent Obsession, All That Heaven Allows, and Lover Come Back. He was also a critically acclaimed actor, receiving an Oscar nomination for his work in the movie Giant in 1956. Hudson was the epitome of a male movie star, and yet the fact that he was secretly gay was one of the worst-kept secrets in Hollywood. So while the public at large fully bought into the notion that he was straight as an arrow and a classic male lead, the town that employed him knew quite well he was gay. In the early to mid-50s, however, those rumors had started to gain traction, to the point where a tabloid threatened to publish a story outing Hudson. Hudson's agent attempted to keep things under wraps by quickly arranging a wedding. Rock married his secretary at the time, Phyllis Gates. The two were hitched in 1955, then divorced in 58. The divorce didn't help stop the rumors of Hudson's homosexuality. In fact, they became so widespread, they're credited with starting the era of invasive tabloid journalism. The gossip rag Confidential started outing Hollywood stars against their will. This, along with their stories of other Hollywood rumors, led the publication to achieve success in the 50s and paved the way for more tabloids going forward. To be fair, Hudson always insisted his marriage to Gates was legit. Then in 1984, Hudson was diagnosed with AIDS. This further fueled speculation that he was gay, as it was erroneously seen as a gay-centric disease at that time. Hudson was actually one of the first prominent celebrities to reveal an AIDS diagnosis, and he was one of the first famous celebs to die of AIDS-related illness as well. In coming forward with his illness, he was considered a highly influential figure in helping AIDS awareness grow and become mainstream. Judy Garland and Vincente Minnelli. Judy Garland was a Hollywood legend despite only living to 47. She's best known for playing Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz in 1939, though her career as an actress and recording artist grew from there. She appeared in films like Meet Me in St. Louis, Summer Stock, and The Harvey Girls. She also released albums as a talented singer and was actually the first female to win Album of the Year at the Grammys. Over the course of her life, she won a Golden Globe, a special Tony Award, as well as Oscar and Emmy nominations. The lady could do it all. However, as with many of the stars in this video, Judy's life was utterly controlled by the movie studios, perhaps more so than any other. Studio execs began criticizing her weight and figure when she was quite young, which led to psychological and emotional issues that plagued her for years. They also created untenable shooting schedules for the young star, who, to literally stay awake to film, turned to stimulant drugs. All of this made for a fragile person who was taken down by substance abuse issues. In the end, she died at age 47 from an accidental drug overdose in 1969. But before that, she married Vincente Minnelli in 1945. They had met on the set of Meet Me in St. Louis, which Minnelli directed. Minnelli actually lived as an openly gay man, which was fairly rare in Hollywood circles at the time. But the two entered into a lavender marriage. Apparently, Judy was fully aware of Minnelli's homosexuality and didn't have any issues with it. She in fact felt she was helping him out due to the stringent morality clauses abundant at the time. The two had a daughter, Liza, who went on to become a Hollywood legend herself. Dorothy Arzner. Arzner was the only female director in Tinseltown in her day. She directed almost 24 films over the course of 24 years and was the first woman granted membership to the Directors Guild Association. Arzner was close friends with Francis Ford Coppola and is often credited with teaching him the filmmaking ropes. She spent the last 40 years of her life living with her partner, choreographer and screenwriter Marion Morgan. It's alleged she also had relationships with women like Joan Crawford, Alla Nazimova, Billie Burke, and Ona Munson. Hattie McDaniel and Tallulah Bankhead. Hattie McDaniel is best known for being the first African-American to win an Oscar for her role in 1939's Gone with the Wind. Tallulah Bankhead was primarily a stage actress, though she did appear in several films, including Alfred Hitchcock's Lifeboat in 1944. In her private life, Bankhead struggled with substance abuse and reportedly smoked as many as 120 cigarettes a day. She was a remarkably straightforward woman who wasn't afraid to openly discuss her vices. Another thing she was very candid about was her numerous relationships with both men and women. Bankhead refused to label herself as bisexual. Instead, she preferred to use the term ambisextress to describe her sexuality. Some of the women she's been romantically linked to include Greta Garbo, Blythe Daly, Beatrice Lillie, Marlene Dietrich, and Hattie McDaniel. In Kenneth Anger's 1965 Hollywood expose, Hollywood Babylon, he asserted Bankhead and McDaniel were a hot item, but the rumors of their alleged relationship had persisted for years before that. While it's not known for certain that the two ever shared a bed, it certainly seems likely they did at some point. Not only was there a supposed relationship notable for being an early example of a non-heterosexual romance in Hollywood, but it was also boundary pushing due to the interracial dynamic. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like and click join to become a Factsverse member. With your membership, you'll get access to exclusive videos featuring more mature, risque content like this. Barbara Stanwyck. Throughout her 6-decade-spanning career as a stage, film, and TV actress, Stanwyck was known for her versatility and strong, authentic screen presence. She was a favorite of some of old Hollywood's most prestigious directors, including Frank Capra, Cecil B. DeMille, and Fritz Lang. She got her start as a Ziegfeld girl in the early 1920s. After performing on Broadway for several years, she transitioned to film when she was cast in Frank Capra's 1930 talkie Ladies of Leisure. After that, she went on to star in 85 films and many television shows. Although she married twice, first to Frank Fay and later to Robert Taylor, Stanwyck was evidently a closeted lesbian who buried her secret deep beneath her public image. While we can't confirm this with certainty, there is a lot of evidence that seems to imply it. It's also very likely her publicist, Helen Ferguson, was the love of her life. Even if she wasn't a lesbian, Stanwyck's on- and off-screen persona has led her to become a gay icon of sorts. Joan Crawford. Known for her roles in films like Mildred Pierce, Whatever Happened to Mary Jane, and Autumn Leaves, Crawford is also infamous for her acrimonious relationships with her two oldest children, Christina and Christopher. After Joan's death in 1977, Christina wrote a tell-all memoir called Mommy Dearest, detailing her mother's alleged abuse. In 1981, it was adapted into a film by the same name, which starred Faye Dunaway. For some reason, Crawford's bisexuality is hardly ever mentioned. Even though she had a reputation for being somewhat of a man-eater, it's long been known she was bisexual. It's been reported she had romances with women like Marilyn Monroe, Martha Raye, Barbara Stanwyck, and Marion Morgan. Greta Garbo. While Garbo dated dozens of men throughout her life, unlike other women featured in this video, she never married any of them. When she was 19, while working on a largely forgotten German film, shortly before finding her way to the States, she was seduced by Marlene Dietrich. After their relationship soured, Garbo was so hurt by Marlene, she denied ever knowing her for the rest of her life. After moving to Hollywood, she had a romantic relationship with writer and actress Salka Vertel, who introduced her to Mercedes d'Acosta. Other ladies Garbo supposedly hooked up with include Louise Brooks, Lillian Tashman, and Billie Holiday. Katharine Hepburn. When she was still a kid, Hepburn reportedly shaved her head and started going by the name Jimmy. As she grew into a world-famous Hollywood superstar, she retained her affinity for boyish attire. More often than not, Hepburn was seen wearing pants at a time when such a wardrobe choice was considered shocking and taboo. Interestingly, her only husband, Ogden Ludlow Smith, was also bisexual, and there's evidence to suggest her notorious affair with Howard Hughes was likely a publicity stunt. Some of her alleged lovers include Irene Mayer Selznick, Laura Harding, Jane Loring, Billie Burke, Judy Hollywood, and Alyssa Landy. Alla Nazimova. This actress, director, and producer was openly bisexual and regularly slept with women while being married to Sergei Golovin. On Sunset Boulevard, she founded the Garden of Allah Hotel, which became a popular retreat for queer stars of the time. She also coined the expression the sewing circle as a code word for bisexual, bi-curious, and lesbian actresses. Some of her lovers included Jean Acker, Natasha Rambova, Dolly Wilde, Grace Darmond, and Gleska Marshall. She lived with the latter from 1929 until her death in 1945. Marlene Dietrich. With a career that spanned 8 decades from the 1910s to the 1980s, Dietrich was one of the most prolific Hollywood actresses of her time. Throughout her career, she carefully crafted her professional image while keeping her private life out of the public eye as much as possible. She was bisexual and frequented gay bars and drag balls in Berlin in the 1920s. She was a gender bender before the term was even invented. She didn't care about abiding by cultural norms and dated whomever she pleased. Her masculinity appealed to women, while her intense sexuality was irresistible to men. After moving to the U.S. and becoming a massive film star, she had affairs with countless men and women. Some of her alleged lovers were Greta Garbo, Mercedes de Acosta, Tallulah Bankhead, Edith Piaf, and Claudette Colbert. Mercedes de Acosta. Although she never managed to achieve a lot of recognition for her work as a poet and novelist, de Acosta is famed for her numerous lesbian affairs with Hollywood and Broadway stars, including Marlene Dietrich, Isadora Duncan, Alla Nazimova, and most notably, Greta Garbo. She and Garbo struck up a romance in 1931, although their relationship was on again, off again, and often volatile. Mercedes was one of the few and far between LGBT people of her day who made no attempt to live in the closet. She slept with just about every bisexual and lesbian Hollywood celebrity you can think of, and evidently, as a child, she grew up thinking she was a little boy. In 1920, she married a heterosexual man, but insisted the wedding remain private. Reportedly, when her husband carried her over the threshold that evening, she was seen frowning. That marriage was doomed from the start, but they still managed to keep things going until 1935 when they divorced. In 1960, she wrote a memoir called Here Lies the Heart. The book has since become an important document of LGBT history, since in it she hinted at the lesbian nature of some of her relationships. Now it's time to hear from you. Which one of these women was most surprising to hear about? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to FactsVerse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.